Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of His Dark Materials. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have Lyra leaving a note for Will to be like, hey, I'm going back to, meet with that scholar, to meet with Mary, because she wants to understand dust. Going off on her own, which Pam was kind of like, no, we should be looking for Will's dad because that's what the alethiometer was kind of saying. But obviously for Lyra, searching for, figuring out dust, obviously in this case dark matter, figuring that out takes priority. So she ends up being on her way. Mary gets a visit from a cop. And, Mary tries to get Lyra out of there in time, but the cop sits down and talks to her. And obviously she's giving the answers like, oh, I'm Lizzie, I did this and that. Like, oh, do you go to school? And she's being very, cheeky with kind of a little bit of her responses until it's like, oh, are you staying with Will? And she's like, yes. And then she pauses because she's like, crap, about Will. So luckily she was able to get away in the long run. But obviously, she ends up hopping in the car with Borio, not realizing, the whole thing was a trap. And obviously, he's like, no, I'm going to drive you to your home. She's like, no, I don't like that. Because obviously, she's putting on a seatbelt, and she's like, wait, she feels uncomfortable because the moment she pulls on it, obviously, the seatbelt can lock. So she was obviously is unfamiliar, and now she's a little worried. So she bounces. The moment she got out of the car, I was like, you don't have your bag, do you? And he was like, here's your bag. I was like, the fact that you gave it back was interesting. I was like, the alethiometer's not going to be there, is it? And it's like, lo and behold, he took the alethiometer because it makes sense, but I just thought that was so interesting in the long run. I was like, oh, poor Lyra, especially when Will actually does finally catch up to her. He finds her crying, and because she blames herself because obviously the alethiometer is so important, especially because it's the only means of finding Will's dad too. So she feels, so distraught about it. And obviously it's like the cops are asking her, so they know about her connection to Will. So it's like they're both on the run, so they both have to disappear. They're gonna wait till nightfall and then go over to Boreal's place. Obviously, his alias he uses. But I thought it was so neat there in the movie theater. I thought it was so interesting. I was like, oh, you're watching Paddington Bear. I've never seen either one, so I don't even know which one it is. But the fact of the matter is, he's got a big bag of popcorn, tube of popcorn. She's getting some and she's eating it, and she's like, what is this? And he's like, it's popcorn. She's like, it's disgusting, it tastes like so and so. And then he was like, well, stop eating it. She's like, I can't. I thought it was such an adorable thing of just like her being like, oh, it's so disgusting, it's terrible, but I can't stop eating it. Which immediately seeing her eat popcorn, I was like, man, it's been a hot minute since I had some popcorn. Actually made me want to crave some popcorn. It made me crave it popcorn at the moment. But nevertheless, for Willa, it's like, oh, you can't take anything seriously. She's like, just because I'm not in a ball crying on a corner, don't think I'm not taking anything seriously. Like, obviously, the reason why figuring out what dark matter is and why it's so feared by, the Magisterium, but also why, Roger died because of it and everything. And for her, she feels like, obviously she's like, I'm always thinking about Roger. I miss him. I wish I could talk to him right now, but I can't. And for her, it's solving the mystery about Dusk will make her feel like at the very least it means that his death wasn't for nothing. At least there might be something she can pull from this, gain from learning about Dusk, And obviously for Will, it's like, I didn't come after you, I came after you because I care about you, I was worried about you. And I was like, oh, that's sweet. But what I thought was kind of interesting, and maybe this is just me reading too much into it, when Lyra and Pan were watching, obviously he goes through a dimension, so I'm sure it's very reminiscent of them, like, oh my god, we go through, makes you wonder, is that why they chose that movie specifically? But what made me think across my mind, I was like, do you think that's, because obviously Pan still hasn't chosen a form, to be fair, Lyra likes the fact that she likes Pan constantly shifting. Like, obviously, that benefits her in some situations, but it's just like she prefers Pan that way. But then both looking at the movie, part of me is like, especially because her connection to Yorick, it makes me think, is she eventually going to eventually have him settle on the form of a bear? That made me wonder, is that what that's going to happen in the long run? Like I said, I could be easily reading too much into it, but I just thought maybe in that moment, like I said, it could just be like, oh man, this is a moving picture movie, with someone going to another world. Maybe that's all there was to it, but it made me think maybe that's Pan and her potentially settling on, in some shape or form, on what Pan's final form is going to be. So there's that side of things. Obviously, you have Seraphina, not Seraphina, Seraphine. It is Seraphina, right? yeah, I'm terrible with names sometimes, sorry. But she was basically, obviously the witches in general are going to want to strike back about the Magisterium because of the vile attack they caused, but it's like, we got to set our priorities. Basically, Lyra is what's important right now because she's going to bring about the war that's going to change everything. So for, it's like we need to find Lyra and we need to protect her because of her destiny. And even that whole conversation about destiny is a complicated and interesting thing because Lyra isn't supposed to know her destiny because if you do tell her destiny, if she knows her destiny, it won't come true. It's that thing of like, because it's a thing of like once you know something, you might take everything you have and steer in the opposite direction, or maybe you become so conscious of it, like, oh, like you become too aware of the circumstances. So it's like if they let her know about what her destiny is, it could throw it all into question. It could, because obviously Seraphina's demon ends up visiting Yorick because it's like, obviously for him, he's one of the people that knows, hey, Lyra went through because obviously him and his people are struggling because of the whole Azrael tore into the sky to that other world. It's caused, food shortages for them. It's like the seals aren't around, so his people are kind of starving. So things aren't looking good on their front. But it's like, obviously, he's not a fan of the whole, like, not letting Lyra know thing. It's just like, oh, she's just another tool, a thing. But it's like, fate kind of controls all of them. But Lyra will be the key to basically throw destiny, basically scatter destiny, essentially. So it's like, so now he's going to go back and probably tell her about, okay, Lyra's in another world. Because obviously a lot of people don't know. Like, obviously, Coulter just found out last episode about where Lyra is. Which is interesting because Will's kind of being led. Obviously, I guess the winds are supposed to be taking him in. Because I thought, wouldn't it be easier just to kind of directly him take... But I guess it's like, maybe it's one of those things where the journey there is just as important. But also probably like that way you make sure he's not being followed. Like, just kind of nudging him in the right direction with the wind. But obviously he's asking questions about Gruzman. And I love that he's there talking to that guy. And he's just like, The guy's like, hey, you know what I said? And he was like, oh, I'm sure. What did you say? And it's like, no. And it's like, oh yeah, riveting. But obviously he's hearing stories about like Gruzman had like basically he's dead, and something else saying he's alive, that basically got trapped in a bear trap. He had to cut his own leg off to escape. Obviously he was working at an observatorium or something, and then like Lee went there, but Home Dude was kind of like, oh, Gruzman's heretic. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, oh, amen. We're about to get out of here. He gets shot at. Lee defends himself, but obviously Lee doesn't like killing people. So for him, it's like, he feels so strong. He's like, why'd you do that? And the guy's like, he's a heretic, and you're one too. Like, if he's an enemy of the Magisterium, it makes you an enemy of it. And obviously Hester's like, we need to get out of here. But before they could, they're surrounded. They get locked up. Coulter finds out about this, comes and finds Lee, who got the crap beaten out of him. I guess that's the Magisterium trying to be like, oh, like, try to beat some. He's like, well, whatever you need me to say, oh, the Magisterium, oh, they're great, whatever you need me to say. Can I go now? And, like, it's that little coy back and forth. And it's like, oh, do you know someone named Lyra? And it's like, oh, it's someone with that last name? It's like, oh, could that be Azrael's little girl? And so Coulter's like, you know who I am, I know who you are. It's like, yeah, we've never had the pleasure, So it's like, I'm Lyra's mom, so tell me where she is. But obviously, and to me, that whole scene had this very interesting aspect to it, because obviously for Lee, it's like, I'm willing to die for her because my life is only worth 1/10 of hers, like, because he sees like how special she is. It's like, for him, he says like, for so long, basically, he's kind of been walking around almost dead, and it's like she breathed hope back into him, because he was a very, I guess, borderline. I think this is probably the first time in a long time he's cared about something or someone else other than himself. And we actually learned a little bit about his past. Like, he's like, oh, you can do whatever you want to me. Like, you can beat me, do whatever you need to. Like, he's like, I know I don't have really many skills, but that's something he learned from a young age, from his dad's abuse, that, oh, I can take a beating. I won't break, And so he tells about the one time his dad hit him so hard and like messed up his leg that it swole up. His dad was something like, oh, don't you dare run. He was like, I'm so messed up, I can't even put my shoes on right now to run, And it was the back and forth. It's like, when Lee looked at her, it's like, but you do know what I'm talking about. Like, it's like, what it's like that, I forgot how Lee phrased it. It was almost like this sad thing of like, because of the abuse, you kind of feel some some twisted comfort from it, and it's almost like, because it makes you feel it, because it's almost like that's how you value yourself, which like Lee's looking at her, it's like, you know that you've had that type of, she's like, you don't know me, but when that moment between them, it's like the reason why Coulter's kind of the way she is, it seems like, she had an upbringing with complicated parents, because obviously that's something we haven't really touched on. I don't think that was covered at all in season 1, but there's this complicated thing back and forth between them, and I thought that was so interesting, almost like a kindred spirit thing. And because of that, she walked away, because obviously for him, it's like, he gets where she's coming from. It's like, I get it, you're her mom, you love her, but loving her isn't enough. Loving isn't saying that you're not going to end up hurting her or putting her in danger, but for him, it's like, he loves that girl too, so, obviously for love, he'll protect her as well, so, like, they're kindred spirits in many different regards. And then even, like, when Coulter left, Hester had this moment where she was like, it's been a while since you brought him up, but it's like saying, like, he did good, them, like, butting heads together like that. I was like, that was such a beautiful, like, heartfelt moment. And then even Coulter in the hallway, like, kind of leaning against the wall, and her demon coming and taking her hand. I was like, oh! I was like, actually, that's... Because, like, Coulter, she has her moments where you can see that she is... She does some despicable things, but we still don't know the ins and outs of all the reasons why she does what she does. Like, obviously it shows that she is capable of love, like obviously the complicated thing between her and Azrael, but also she does love Lyra, because I think in her mind she believes everything she does is for Lyra, like whether Lyra will ever understand it or not. I think it's kind of her perspective. And obviously she gets a note from Boreal saying like, hey, I know where she is, so she busts Lee out, because for her it's like, because of Lyra's destiny, a lot of people are going to be after her. So if you find her, you protect her. You find her before me, you protect her. And it's like that, despite everything, she's still a mom wanting to protect her daughter. Like, she's very complicated in that regard. Like, she's not so... There is a lot of depth to, Coulter, So I just thought that was kind of interesting, so... And then you also have Mary trying to use the machine like Lyra, but obviously it's not responding the way she wants it to. It's not as, the manipulation of like the dark matter isn't as strong as it is with Lyra. So it's like, all right, and it's like, oh, tell me if Lyra's okay. Just give me a yes or no. But when she walks away, the machine takes on the form of a snake, and it's like, that's Boreal's demon. At first she's kind of okay, because she's like, hey, she's gotten away, because she hears from dude, like, what's his name, George. It's like, oh yeah, he got away. I mean, she got away. Good. She's kind of happy about it. I think we are going to be spending a little bit more time with Mary. Obviously, we're meeting her niece, her nephew, and her sister, because her sister's like, oh, you need to maybe taking time away from work will give you, the breakthrough you needed. And it's interesting because obviously she applies that to this whole thing, because she is reading a book and she's trying to like channel like how to control the dark matter. And she's not there to witness it on the screen, but it shows that she is, because it's basically like a clear mind can make the universe submit to you, essentially. And we do see that eventually, like obviously it starts taking shape as she's kind of trying to clear her mind with those sticks and everything, and we do see on the screen at her job that it is working and manifesting in different shapes and forms. So it's like, so now she's got to figure out, because obviously Lyra says she has something really important to do. Now, what that necessarily important thing is, we don't know yet. Mary doesn't either. I mean, I guess it pertains to figuring out the secrets to dusk, aka dark matter. So that's one side of things. And then on the other side of things, we have Will and Lyra showing up at Boreal's place, and he invites them in and everything. And obviously, she's still giving fake names to herself as well as Will. And they're like, "Hey, I think Lyra left something. Lizzie left something in your car." And he's like, "Oh, this?" And it's like, he's like, "No, it's mine. I'm a collector." And he's like, and says Will and Lyra, and she's like, "Wait," kind of confused. I hadn't rewatched season 1, so I didn't remember the fact is that they actually have run into each other before. He brings up the party that Lyra was at with Coulter in season 1. It's like, oh, you're not as, what was it? Basically not as on top. You're not as sharp as your mom is. And she was like, it's like, oh, right. I ran into you in a party. I have met you. So now she realizes, like, she pieces it together, like, you're from my world. You're from the Magisterium. Right. So she's like, you give that back to me. All you're going to do is just lock it away, because that's what the Magisterium does. Anything that goes against what they believe, it's like, oh, this is heresy. Let's lock it away. Which I thought that was kind of interesting. Where he's like, oh, I was willing to give you a chance to take it back. I was like, what? I mean, granted, whatever this. Obviously, he wants the knife. It's like the knife. Apparently, it's in a tower that Will was asking that girl back in that other world. He was asking her about the tower because she was like, oh, it's a, like, she got dodgy about it too. I thought was interesting because she was like, yeah, it might be a ghost or something. He's like, but Will's like, no, there's definitely someone in there. But it's like she was getting dodgy about it because she brings up the fact is that like I think she said like her brother or something had told her about the guild, which are basically like a bunch of men who know like a lot more than know a lot about a lot of stuff, but they were some of the first people to disappear with the specters. But when the specters came, they were some of the first people to run away specifically, But he wants that knife over the alethiometer. I guess the alethiometer can only really do so much when it's in the proper hands, but this knife is too important, and he knows that Will's connected to it, so it's like, whatever it is, I don't think he knows exactly what the knife is capable of. Maybe he is, and whatever the case may be, he's willing to trade the alethiometer for the knife, so they have to go to the tower, back to that world, and get it. Which is obviously also a dangerous place for Will, because a girl brings it up again. It's like, you got to be coming up with a plan soon, because you're going to be in adulthood, you're going to be becoming a man soon, so the specters are going to come after you. He was like, I'm not scared. She's like, you should be. The only reason why you're not is because you haven't seen what they're capable of. So that's a whole angle to this, and Lyra's kind of standing up to Boreal, being like, we'll get you your knife. So it's going to be interesting to see how that whole situation play out. There's certain things from the trailer I vividly remember that I think are correlated to getting the knife and everything, so that's definitely going to be interesting to see what that ends up being. And obviously when they find out what the knife can do, it's like, because I thought, I'll go ahead and say it, like, based on the trailer, I thought Will's dad made the knife, but maybe it's like a whole thing between like traveling between worlds, maybe like time works differently. I don't think it does, but I could be mistaken. I don't think it does. Time doesn't work differently, but I could be wrong, because I thought he could have made it, but maybe Home Dude and Tower I don't know. That's what I was, but like that could just be a complete and utter misunderstanding on my part. Maybe next episode will give me in particular some clarity about the whole situation. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things take us going forward from here. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.